Okay, so we've been walking through Moses. We've been calling this series Marinate because we've been dealing with the fact that whatever you marinate in becomes a part of you. Whatever you sit in, you soak in, it becomes a part of you. So we were dealing with what happens to your mind when you choose to soak in your fears, what happens to your mind when you choose to soak in things that build your faith. But we're looking at it through the eyes of Moses. Right? So tonight I want to, when we go to Exodus chapter 4, we're going to be looking at some signs that God has for Moses. But I want to see what's in there for you, right? Because God will have signs for you that will help you conquer your fear and keep your fear from owning you, from controlling you, from limiting you, from holding you back. But let's just get to the scripture and see what's in there. So, we're just going to walk through Exodus chapter 4, get as far as we can, and talk about the nuggets that come up. Okay, Exodus, hi, good to see you. Okay, let's dive in. Oh, wait, moving too fast. Want to make sure you know where you are, and then we're going to dive in. All right, let's marinate in Exodus 4. Verse 1, Moses answered, what if they do not? Let me catch you up. Last week when we stopped, God was giving Moses an instruction and showing him how he needed to move whenever he gets to Egypt. And God was placing things in the hand of Moses so that Moses could use them to win. And one of the things that God gave Moses, let's go back and look at it so we make sure we got it. God gave Moses an assignment, a charge. He gave him in a community, telling him the elders were going to go with him. You just need to speak to them and give him a specific message. He gave him a confident strategy that he could rely in. And God also gave him a clear, favorable outcome if he obeyed the instructions that he was given. Now, let's go back. So when we stopped, that's where we were. Now, after God tells Moses everything that he's giving him, he turns around and Moses tells God, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? So even after hearing all of that, he was like, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't go with me? Oh, hold on for 1 second. Here we go again. There we go. Okay. So he's like, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't trust? So even though God has given him the instruction, the fear is still causing him to talk back, to fight back against what God is telling him to do. Now, we do that. God gives us instructions and then and answers our questions, but the fear just keeps kind of swirling around and causes us to fight against the instruction that we've been given. Because remember, he was given a charge. He was given a community, so he was never going to have to deal with Pharaoh on his own. He was given a strategy that he could have confidence in, and he was promised a clear, favorable outcome. But the fear, because he's been living with fear for 40 years, right? And when you've been living with an issue for 40 years, it doesn't always go away the first time you address it. So now Moses is going back to God, challenging, his fear is challenging the instruction. So in verse 2, then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff, Moses replied. Then the Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground and it became a snake. And he ran from it, which makes sense because Moses is operating in fear. So he throws the staff on the ground. The staff turns into a snake and Moses runs from the staff. Then the Lord speaks to Moses and he says, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. Here's the thing about God. He does not give your fear any place in your heart and in his assignment for your life. He doesn't make room for the fear. When you deal with God and when God is dealing with you, he always challenges our fears. He always attacks our fears. He always causes us to have to deal with our fears. So now let's look at it again. Moses is standing before God. He has received major instruction in chapter 3. He has been standing in front of the burning bush in chapter 3. He's been given an assignment in chapter 3. I think the bush was chapter 2. Now, he's got all this and his fear starts speaking to God. What if they don't believe me? What do I do? And what God does is he doesn't fuss them out. He gives them a sign. He says, take the staff in your hand, throw it down. When he throws it down, it becomes a snake. He tells, and Moses runs away. God continues to speak to the strength in Moses. He continues to speak to the leadership in Moses. He continues to speak to the king in Moses when he tells Moses, I want you to reach down and grab the thing that you are afraid of by the tail. Okay, when he grabs the thing that he is afraid of by the tail, Moses reaches out and takes a hold of the snake, and it turned back into the staff in his hand. This is what I love. Whenever God gives the instruction for you to grab the thing that you are afraid of by the tail, the thing that you are afraid of loses power, right? So when we look at Moses, because Moses identifies from a place of fear, but God identifies Moses as a leader, right? But just because that's what God sees, he has to get his man to see himself the way God sees him in order for him to have the strength to fulfill the assignment. So in your own life, there are different moments where God is working to get his daughter to see herself the way the Father sees her, working to get his son to see himself the way the son sees him. So there will be moments of fear where you just wish it would go away. And in that moment of fear, God gives you an instruction. God gives you an assignment. God gives you something to do in order to check that fear. And I want to say something. Even though Moses in his mind identified from a place of fear, you can tell that he was responding to God. You can tell by the fact that he talked to the bush. You can tell that he listened to the instruction. You can tell that he ran away from the snake, but even when God said grab it by the tail, the fact that he came back and grabbed it, Moses is just trying to get where God is. It's trying to see himself the way God sees him. Moses does not want to be a coward, right? It's just the fear latched onto him for so long. He probably became used to it. I can say that because I know what that feels like. But then God gives him instruction and he keeps trying to lean into it. Let's keep going. Exodus chapter 4, verse 5. This said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Then the Lord said, so before we go to the second sign, so the first sign was about the snake, right? The staff and the snake. So before we go to the second sign, I want us to look at this. God's telling him that if they challenge you, this is what I want you to do. So this sign right here was for him to use when he was talking to the elders, to get the elders to line up. Now, here's what's so important. When God assigned the elders to walk with Moses as Moses went in to deal with Pharaoh, right? So then he doesn't just send Moses alone. He could have sent Moses alone, but there's a reason why he sends Moses with the elders. It creates an atmosphere of order, but I don't want you to miss it. It releases the power of unity, right? And whenever you operate in the power of unity, then whatever strength that I show up with on my own, when I operate in it unified with another, that strength gets magnified. Not only that, when I operate from a place of unity, it is harder to destroy me because I am not standing by myself, because my strength gets wrapped with your strength, and so then they have to work harder to try to tear us down. There's so much power in unity that it makes sense that there was so much effort in making sure the elders line up, and because he could have sent Moses in with all power, you know what I'm saying, and doing it by himself, but he sent him in unity. He sent him in with visual support. So I want you to see something else that God will do for you. When he gives you an assignment, he usually has people who are prepared or being prepared and ready to help you, right? So I want you to deal with the parts of us that have a hard time receiving the support and receiving the help. I want you to call that part of you out today. Here's my prayer for you. Whatever support God sends you, whatever help God sends you, whatever answers God sets aside for you, may you receive them with open arms. I cancel any block to God's support, to the team that God has assigned for you. And I pray for every sign and wonder that is to be done to help them to see God's best design in the assignment so you can walk forward in unity and get that magnified power. So this is why the staff and the snake, right? So that's to bring the team together. Now let's look at the next sign. Okay, so go back to 5. This, said the Lord, is so that they believe that the Lord, their God, wait, let me slow down. This is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Okay, let me show you something else. Now, when you deal with Moses, right, he is a man that has committed murder 40 years ago and ran away to keep from getting killed. Okay, it's been 40 years. When Moses gets back, there's going to be someone that knows what he did, that remembers what he did. There's going to be someone that's like, that's that dude that got away with murder, right? There's someone in the back of their mind. Why should we listen to them? Here's what's interesting about God. When you go into the New Testament, Paul, the one who wrote 66% of the New Testament, right? Remember, Paul was a man who used to persecute believers, used to murder believers in the name of the established church because he did not see, identify, or recognize the new thing that God was doing. God shook up Paul's entire life, made him blind for a while so that he could see what God was doing instead of only see what he was doing and what the church, what the religious church was doing. He made him physically blind so he could finally see in the spirit. Now, this man has a change of heart. He begins to line up with God. He begins to line up with Christ. He begins to serve. Okay? So now he has the assignment for the rest of his life of preaching the gospel that he used to persecute. God used Paul so completely that Paul you could tell that he would see the teachings of Christ, and in his letters, he would explain it and break it down so that the different people that he was ministering to could understand what Jesus was saying. They could get a fresh revelation of what the disciples received in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You see what I'm saying? So there's so much in it, okay? So what I want you to see is Paul was a murderer, and God shifted his entire life, his entire assignment, and then gave him the assignment of the lifetime. Now, but before there was ever Paul, Moses was a murderer. And God shifted his entire life, gave him the assignment of the lifetime, and both of them were sent back to serve in the areas where they had been seen, being destructive, okay? Okay, so there are things that will cause us shame that God knows his grace is enough for you. That things that cause you shame, that when he gives you the grace and you receive it, it begins to cause healing, but it does something else. It creates humility. And when we operate from a place of humility, the voice of God is louder. When we operate from a place of pride, our voice is louder. When we operate from humility, we understand that except for the grace of God, there I go. Another silly woman, another silly man. Except for the grace of God, I am controlled by my pain. I am controlled by darkness. I am controlled by my issues. But the grace of God forgives me. The grace of God covers me. The grace of God heals me. The grace of God holds me up higher than I could ever hold myself up. So I just want you to see that in the Old Testament, we see this moment with Moses, but I want you to know that he turns around and does the same thing with Paul. So I say this because he will do the same thing with you. Right? Because everybody doesn't know your story. Everybody don't know your issues. Everybody don't know your past. Everybody don't know everything you ever did to hurt someone. Right? But I want you to know it's not too much for you to go to God and allow him to do whatever it is he wants to do in you. Right? In spite of what you came from and in spite of what you have done. Okay? So I just want you to know, because we see this at least twice. Now let's keep going. There's the second sign. Then the Lord said, put your hand inside your cloak, right? So he's got on a cloak. He has him to put his hand inside the cloak. So when it goes inside the cloak, Moses can't see his hand. So Moses puts his hand into his cloak, and when he takes it out, the skin was leprous. It had become as white as snow. So now when Moses pulls his hand out, it is diseased, right? And when you have leprosy, you are to be separated from the people. And they don't know what to do for you, right? Except for without healing, leprosy is a death sentence. At the least, it is isolation and complete separation. Now look at verse 7, Exodus 4 and 7. Now put it back in your cloak, God tells him. And you see this time, whenever he pulls out the diseased hand, you don't see him running. He just stands still because he's beginning to catch this revelation that let me finish listening to what God is doing, right? Because he is doing something. And if I can hold the fear in check and stay in the place of hearing him, I'm going to come out on the other side better than I was before. So then God says, put it back in. So Moses puts his hand back in the cloak. And when he takes it out, he was restored like the rest of his flesh. Then God says, if they do not believe you and pay attention to the first sign. So he's giving them order. So don't come in there and then doing the cloak sign. He says first, if they don't listen to the first sign, the sign with the snake and the staff, then I want you to use the second sign, the sign with the cloak and the leprosy, right? Now here's something I want you to see, okay, that stands out. Moses sees firsthand when God restores him, right? And the reason why this is so important is because that's what he's going to do when he gets to Egypt. He's going to restore the Israelites. He's going to restore them to what they were originally assigned for, right? He's going to take them back and set them up to continue to live out the promises that they were given under Abraham, under Isaac, under Jacob, that had been taken from him, that they had lost while in Egypt. He's going to restore them. So when Moses sits there with this sign with the cloak and the disease, right, he sees God restores, and it's another sign within a sign. This is going to convince the elders, right? If they don't believe the first sign, this will convince them. But I want you to see something. I'm sending you for restoration. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Where did we stop? Then the Lord said, if they do not believe, pay attention to the first sign, but if they do not believe to thee, here we go. So we stopped at verse 8. Now he says, but if they, at verse 9, Exodus 4 and 9, but if they do not believe these two signs, and if they do not listen to you. So here's something I want you to see. The first thing God expects to happen is he expects Moses to go back into Egypt, go to the elders and to speak. And he expects the elders to believe. And what you have to understand, the first assignment that Moses had was to speak, right? To speak. Okay, so now the big deal about this is you're going to see that Moses is extremely scared of the speaking. But I want you to understand something. You are a spirit, a speaking spirit that lives in a body, and you are responsible for your soul, right? So your first assignment is to speak. Right? The first assignment is the things that you say. The first assignment is about what comes out of your mouth. Okay? So this is why this is such a big deal. Moses is not to run in there, you know what I'm saying, turning the staff into a snake, doing all this sensational stuff first. The first assignment is to use the voice and use the words that God gave him. And what we see in this is it's the same thing for us. Sometimes we will deal with bad situations and we will come out the gate screaming and yelling. We'll come out the gate trying to buy our way out of the problem, bust our way out of the problem, fight our way out of the problem, manipulate our way out of the problem, or just run away from the problem. But the first assignment that God gave Moses is no different than the first assignment that he gave you. Speak my words with your voice, right? Because when we speak his words, it has the power to move hearts, including your heart in building your faith and the heart of your enemies, right? So then I want you to pay attention to this first assignment to speak, because there have been moments where speaking has stopped violence. that I was standing in front of. And there's in the New Testament, it talks about being a peacemaker. But I noticed today a lot of people don't buy into it. They don't honor the power of making peace. I have known people that I love, but when they had a chance to make peace and to mend bridges, they ran their mouths and they created chaos and they destroyed relationships instead. And God counts that. He looks at that and he will deal with that in your heart if you allow that to continue to be used, because that's not your first assignment. The first assignment is to speak his words and use your voice to build a bridge, to build healing, to build clarity, to give instruction. And it was the same for Moses. We see Jesus do it, and it is the same for us. Because whenever you look, there were 2 different times where Jesus fed thousands of people in a miraculous way. But the feeding of the people came after the speaking. The first healing came through the words. So the signs are designed to help the elders hear the voice, hear the word, and receive the instruction. The speaking is a powerful move. So I want you to be deliberate this week about honoring your voice and honoring God's instruction even more. And start by mirror talk, looking in the mirror and speaking what he says about you to you, speaking the instructions he's giving you to you, right? And you can start with something simple. If you feel like you haven't heard, I want to give you something. God, right, has given you assignments, promised you blessings, spoken healings and opportunities for you. I want you to look in the mirror, right, and speak to yourself and tell yourself, I receive all of the blessings of God. I receive all of the promises of God. I receive everything that God is trying to do through me in this entire lifetime. I commit this life to God. No more delay. Fear, you have no more power here. I receive everything that God is saying and everything that God is doing. Let me reiterate. The assignment is for you to look in the mirror and say that to you. Okay? That's your mirror talk assignment. Okay? Because I do not want you to miss out on it. Because some of us will run in trying to do all this big stuff and you miss the first stuff. Speak. Right? And then if they don't believe what you spoke, then the signs. But you can't expect other people to believe what you say when you don't believe what you say. And I'm telling you that whenever I do mirror talk, I tend to end up giggling because that person needs to hear you say it. You need to hear you say it. It does something to your spirit. It does something to your soul when you look in the mirror and speak life. So instead of waiting for someone to come up and hold your face and speak it to you, you do it every day, right? And when those special moments happen, they're just adding to it because you've been feeding yourself the faith word. So when God tells you he's going to do something for you, through you, and you don't believe it, you know how whenever you hear that stuff and your head starts saying no, right? Your assignment is to mirror talk it. You know what? God said this about you, girl. See, I'm talking to myself. God said this about you, girl, and I receive it, right? If you're a man, God said this about you, man, right? And I receive it. You're talking. Now let's keep going. So even though here the first sign is the staff and the snake, the second sign is the cloak and the disease, but the first assignment is to speak, to speak. Okay, so let's see if we got time to get one more in there. So we got our signs and we got our assignment. And the first assignment is to speak. And I know people love the drama. This is why people get caught up in witchcraft and being a witch. Witches are disciplined. You know what I'm saying? They're deliberate in what they do. They are studying, they are practicing their spells, and they have confidence. Then the believers run around and then are lazy in what they do, not studying, don't have the scriptures, and don't have the confidence, right? What he is doing right here when he's requiring you to speak, in order for you to speak and be effective, then you got to be studying, you got to have the scriptures, you got to speak the scriptures, and it's going to give you the confidence, right? So you can walk in your boldness, so you're not running around chasing after somebody else's spiritual walk, which is not the spiritual walk that God gave you. Your walk is in the Word. Your North Star, the star that you look at in order to guide you home, is what the Word says. So then your voice becomes what the Word says. Okay, look at this. Verse 9. Okay, we're going there for real this time. Exodus 4:9. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, I want you to take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from that river will become blood on the ground. So now we've got a new sign, which is the blood, which is the Nile River and the blood. Now, some of y'all who have read this word, you're beginning to see some patterns because you know several chapters ahead. I'm not going to say it today. We'll talk about it when we get to it. But the next sign is the Nile River and the blood. Okay? So now look, Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent." Here we go. "Neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant, I am slow of speech." I want you to see something. Okay, so now God gives Moses 3 signs for him to use if the people do not believe what he says. And then while giving him the signs, he says, if they don't believe what you say, then I want you to use the signs. Now, Moses, you see this? Now, Moses at first was scared of the first sign, right? But by the second sign, he wasn't scared of the signs no more. By the third sign, you don't even see Moses react to the blood. What Moses says is, wait a minute. I'm just now realizing that you want me to talk, and I need to tell you something. Moses is trying to tell God about his abilities. Let me say this again. Moses is trying to tell God about his abilities. Okay, here's the thing. Who made Moses? So who understands what Moses is capable of? God made Moses. God knows what Moses is capable of. God is more clear about Moses, about the abilities that Moses has than Moses does. Because see, what fear does is it lies to you. Fear gives you, it puts "I can't" on repeat, right? It's like a scratch record, right? And so fear has you, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't. That's what fear does. And it trains you of a list of things that so you start repeating a list of things that you believe that you can't do, right? And so then this lie becomes your identity, but God designed Moses to be a leader. And God put a speaking spirit in Moses' body, so Moses actually can speak in spite of the physical ailment or the mental thing that is convincing him that he can't. So Moses has begun to figure this out. Wait a minute, the signs is not the big deal, it's the speaking. He want me to speak first. I got to make sure God understands that he picked the wrong man. That's what Moses is doing. So let me speak to you. I know God. God is no respecter of persons. God is speaking to me, giving me assignments that I feel like are bigger than me. I know that I'm not the only one he's doing that to. He's speaking to you, giving you assignments, some of which that you probably believe that are bigger than you. He's not going to let you off the hook about it. The only way for you to get out of the assignment that God has given you is to go through the assignment and get it done, or just to flat out run. And when you flat out run, it shrinks your life. There's some well somewhere for you to get stuck in, right? And we're not trying to be Jonah out in these spiritual streets. Okay, look at this. Look at this. So Moses is trying to get God together. He is. Okay, verse 10, Exodus 4:10, Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech." So he was like, before you came here talking to me through the burning bush, I ain't never been good with words. And I just want you to know that since you've been talking to me, ain't nothing changed. Right? Verse 11, the Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths?" Uh-oh. The Lord done pulled out the origin card. Let me say it another way. The Lord pulled out the "I brought you in this world." The Lord pulled out the "I made you." The Lord dropped on him, who made your mouth? Who gave you, not just your mouth, who gave all of you your mouth? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight and makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? He's saying the body you have, it came from me. Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. So God saw his fear show up again. So just like with when the staff turned into a snake, God required him to reach down in order for it to turn and to take control of that fear, right? So that the staff would do what it needed, what the man of God needed the staff to do, because the man of God is in charge, not his fears. The man of God is in charge. Now the fear comes up again, and God's immediate response is, I made you. I gave you your sight, I gave you your mouth, and whatever you have and whatever you think is a deficiency, I'm here. I will be with you. And I love what he says. I love what he says. Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. Okay? So then this is my prayer for you guys. I will help you speak and I will teach you what to say. There's one thing about a place of humility. When you are in a place of humility, if it's not guided by faith, right, then fear will take over and it will cause you to run or hide. When you are in a place of humility and it is guided by faith in God, then what will happen is, again, the voice of God will become louder than your voice. The voice of God will become louder than your voice. And when you hear his instructions, there's something in you that will actually believe. You'll develop more, when his voice becomes louder than your voice, then you develop more confidence in what you are doing because you're doing it under his guidance and under his instruction. So, and it lets you accept the help of God. It lets you accept the place of God speaking for you and through you. So for those of you who are on assignment and you have things that you are called to do and they stretch you and they make you feel fear, I want you to understand this, that you have a right to expect God to speak through you, right? And you have a right to expect God to teach you what to say, but I want you to open your heart to receive it. Father, speak through me. Father, teach me what to say. Father, get me out the way. Father, replace my ego pride with your humility. Father, I trust you. Now, teach me how to trust you more. I yield to you. I want you to ask for it in the name of Jesus, right? Now, I'm going to pray for it for you, but then I want you to ask for it by name, right? I'm going to intercede for you, but I also want you to supplicate and make that request from God about you, and I want you to continue to sit in that until it becomes your everyday, because it is a more powerful place when you allow God's words to become your words. And when you start doing things and you get that subtle little nudge that changes the way you do things, where you normally would cuss people out and instead you calm down, right? And then you start asking God what's going on with them. I have had multiple different situations over the last 30 years with the police and black men. And I'm standing there in each different random, unexpected situation, right? And I told you I take being a peacemaker seriously. And the only thing used to keep it from escalating into chaos was my voice and speaking what I felt like God was compelling me to say. So multiple moments where I'm standing between the police and black men and just saying what God is telling me to say. And everybody is doing what I'm saying, right? And at one incident, it was like 30, 40 people, 4 police, 30, 40 black men. And I always knew that it was not me. It was my voice doing an instruction that God gave me. I don't want you to underestimate the power of that first assignment to speak. And we're going to keep going because we're going to see what happens with Moses and his fear, right? With Moses and how God sees Moses, with Moses and his identity, and with Moses and his voice, right? So we're going to keep going. We might be in Exodus. We're going to be in Exodus till we get all the way through it, because God, it has mighty and unique things for you to do. There are moments where you're going to be called to speak on your job. You're going to be called to speak in your family, situations where you're going to be called to speak And that voice, your obeyed, submitted voice to God, is going to create answers, is going to create healing, is going to create breakthroughs. There's a member now, who out-of-state member, where her voice caused people to receive a raise just because she spoke in the moment that she was given. And she spoke out of the wisdom of God. I don't want you to underestimate it as you are moving through life. Allow that first assignment to take center stage. Use that voice. And I understand what it feels like when you're being compelled to speak and you're like, not me. Right? And you hold back. It is very uncomfortable because it keeps running through your mind later because your spirit knows that you rejected an instruction that God gave you. I'm telling you, the fear of speaking when He's telling you to speak is smaller than that feeling when you just disobeyed Him, and that little, what it does in your body over time. And I don't want you to continue to train yourself to ignore the instructions of God, because there's so much power and there's so much anointing in it. All right, y'all, that's my time. That's the lesson for today. So I want to make sure you walk out of here very, very clear. Your first assignment is to speak the instructions that God gives you. And when you are in a prayerful place, you can trust those words because you're not so prideful that you think everything that crosses your mind is the voice of God, right? We're learning how to test that. And one of the things I have learned is that when God gives me an instruction, there will be some pattern in the Word of God to match that assignment. Right? And that begins to train me. Okay, God moves like this. God instructs like this. This is why we dig into the Word, so we can see, how does God actually act? So when we're out here living, we look more like Him, sound more like Him, and quit lying on Him. Not y'all, but people be lying on God. Right? And then He has signs in place. When you speak what He calls you to speak, signs will follow. When God gives you an assignment to speak, and you do what God tells you to do, if the people that He assigned you to do not listen to what He is saying, please understand God has some signs that will follow, right? So that He can get their attention. But the signs only come after the voice fulfills the assignment. All right? All right, let's get out here and let's go practice what we learned. Remember, we are marinating. We're going to spend the rest of this year marinating in what God is saying about you and the leadership that you are called to do. Because that's what Moses' situation is. Building this man up so that he can be the leader that he was designed to be when he was a baby in the bassinet, when they were trying to kill all the Hebrew babies. He still had the assignment of being a leader. That's why so many moments, he has miraculous moments in his first 40 years. I feel like he had a miraculous moments in his second 40 years, because it's not a small thing to find a woman that you love and a woman that loves you back. And to get the chance to become a father the way he did, and to sit under a man of God and receive instruction the way he is. But now we're about to watch the biggest miracles of his life. But they wouldn't have existed if the one in the first 40 years didn't happen, and if the calm that was created in the second 40 years didn't happen, and the training and the lesson.